You send a picture to the group chat and it's you and Mark Cuban. You're talking to Mark Cuban about crypto. But what about like at a personal level, how do you calculate your own net worth? You can negotiate and broker a good salary for yourself, create your own version of being rich and wealthy, and then grow to your financial goals. So that's what we're trying to implement now.
I did a whole bunch of reckless shit, but god damn, it was fun. Let's read the definition of net worth according to Investopedia.
Start thinking like, how do we actually calculate net worth?
So a lot of people wonder how we compile the Forbes billionaires list.
Forbes disputes Kanye West's 6.6 billion net worth. Look up the difference between rich and wealthy. One quick way to get wealthy.
As always, New Rules Podcast. It's your boy McKinley Hayes. I'm here with the man, Automated K. Just stepped in the building. What up, K?
What's up, man? So I think today's a special day. So we started off as a show, like shorter clips, but then we realized that there's room for long form content.
Yeah, for sure. I mean,
so
people
that's
want
what this
that.
is. And I think what rookies do is they say, hey guys, this is our first time podcast, episode 1, subscribe. We're not gonna do that.
No.
We're just gonna dive right into it. So episode 1, basically, we're gonna talk about net worth.
Let me add some more context, because we long form. We can take our time today, right?
Yeah, we can take our time today.
You were in the gym.
I was in the gym doing my...
In your fancy gym, right? Because I do the $16.99 a month. I get in and get out. But your ass be in the steamer, rock climbing, drinking Fiji water, Peloton at every stand, or whatever the latest and greatest technology is. Soul Cycle classes, yoga. You know what I'm saying? Your gym is like $500 a month. I'm sizing it, but it's up there.
Nah, it's like 200.
You send a picture to the group chat and it's you and Mark Cuban.
I mean, we've been around so many celebrities and been in them scenes.
Okay, so I'm not accusing you of being starstruck at all. For us to be a financial literacy, tech advice, career advice podcast, television show, network, whatever you want to call it, that was a big moment, right? So I see a picture of you and Mark Cuban. I immediately hit you like, yo, what the f***? You just met Mark Cuban? What did you talk about? How did it happen? Was it awkward? Did you have to ask him for a picture? Was it weird?
So I work out at Equinox in DC, and it's attached to the Ritz-Carlton. And usually when NBA teams come in town, they stay at the Ritz.
Makes sense.
So I was in there, like, it was just like a random Friday during the workday. I was in there just working out. So I was going to do hot yoga, and I didn't have like any tights, and I went into the store that was there. I was like, hey, like, you got any like male tights or whatever? She was like, nah, but you could try on these Lululemon female tights. I know you didn't expect Story to go there, but that's it is what it is. She was like, well, my boyfriend wear them or whatever. I was like, all right, well, if your boyfriend wear them and he's still a manly dude, then I'm like, give me what you got. So I tried on some Lululemon tights, and they ended up just being just like regular running stuff. Mm-hmm. So I purchased that, and then I went to go work out. When I came back out, same girl, I had built a rapport with her, and I was walking out, and she was like, hey, we're standing here waiting for Mark Cuban to come out and take a picture. You could take a picture with him too. I was like, oh,
wait,
okay.
She said standing here waiting for him to come out, like
she was
he was
out front
already in the gym?
Oh, yeah, so like he was in the gym, so I didn't see him like in the gym.
All right.
Like I didn't see him like actually like working out. Plus it probably would have been weird to go talk to somebody on a treadmill.
I wouldn't do that.
Hey Mark, you know what I'm saying? It'd be super groupie.
People's personal space. But if you catch him in the lobby or walkway, that's different.
Yeah, so I think he must have told them that he was going to come back out to do it because they were waiting for him. So he came out, and then I took the picture for them. Right. And then I've watched a lot of his podcasts and his views on crypto. Yeah. And so it was based on that knowledge. It was an easy dialogue. Right. Because I wasn't really starstruck. I was just like, oh, yeah, man, I like your views on crypto and how you've seen things. I see you very, like you tried different things in the space. Right, some
right.
Work,
so you jumped out there with that convo.
Yeah.
You're talking to Mark Cuban about crypto. That's dope. I'm sorry. We got to celebrate these moments. That because people acting like you playing out here. You got the pods, you got the knowledge, you giving it to people. You see Mark Cuban, and you brought up crypto and he engaged.
Yeah, man, we both investors.
That's good.
Let's go.
All right, I'm sorry, I'm getting hyped now. All right, let's go.
Yeah, so brought it up. He was like, yeah, nah, thanks for noticing. And then I was like, hey, like, you mind if we, so we chatted for like, I wouldn't call it long, right? Like, we're not friends, right. Or maybe we are friends. Maybe I just don't want to tell y'all.
Yeah, he might see this and be like, yeah, that's my guy.
Hey, Mark, and if you're watching this, you're definitely welcome to come on the podcast. We're not big yet, but you're welcome to come on. So
yeah, for sure.
You know what?
Do us a solid.
Can't even hurt. I'll probably reach out to you anyway, bro. So then we ended up just chopping it up for a quick minute. And then I was like, yo, you mind taking a picture? And so we took a couple pictures together, and I was like, yo, thanks. And I just kept it moving. Some of the topics that billionaires are talking about, we're talking about them too. And while we may not have billions of dollars, you got to start somewhere. Right. You know what I'm saying? So
I know you mentioned DeFi on here, and he was the first person I heard use that term. I mean, I always knew decentralization. We studied blockchain. We studied all that stuff. But DeFi is its own orbit around decentralization. And Mark Cuban, they asked him one of those like type of questions they ask all billionaires on like a talk show or something. Like if you were to start over today and you had, I think they said $5,000, what would you do? Or what would be your business idea? And his response was, I would educate the shit out of myself on DeFi right now. DeFi. And he kept talking about it. I did like my basic Google search right at the moment. And what I took away from my like high level definition was basically like, you're not contained like you are in the market. You know what I'm saying? It's like this open season of money that you can put your money into and it will grow. And it's not like figured out yet by the masses. So he's like, if you master it now, you're going to be miles ahead of the competition. Yeah. That was like his answer, but probably put in a more eloquent way. You know what I'm saying? So I'm crediting you with roping in the DeFi aspect of it. Cause like when you brought it up, all I could think about was, I heard Mark Cuban talking about that shit like 2-3 years ago.
Yeah.
So I already told you, you know what I'm saying? It's a fancy gym and you at the Ritz-Carlton and the Mavericks owner just walks in. I want to give you your flowers for being in places to rub shoulders with people like that.
Yeah, nah, definitely, you know, you get normalized to things too quickly. You strive for certain things, but then you just end up, once you get there, it's like everything else, right? Like when you get to a certain level, you're like, oh, I want to make $1 million. I want to earn, I remember back in the day when I was like, I want to earn $100,000.
Yeah.
Now multiples of that. Right. And now we're looking at, looking at 2 mil. And you're still like, it never really, it's almost like being like a frog in boiling water where you're like, okay, yeah, that's cool. Yeah, okay, yeah, like we're at Nobu with so-and-so over there. Oh, this is CeeLo at the W in Arizona. Jack Dorsey at a charity event. You know what I'm saying? So I just end up being in the room with these people to where it's just like, oh, all right, yeah, it's another dude whose ideas are just bigger and better and has been able to execute them. Hopefully I could do that one day. So that's usually how I'm thinking about those interactions, not like fanboy stuff. Yeah. I would say now that we have a podcast, definitely could always make a plug and be like, because I think that's how a lot of people now and in the future are going to build relationships. Right. It's going to be like, oh, come on my podcast. You have an offering. Yeah, you got an offering that's going to benefit them, depending on what your audience is, be able to provide, a bigger exposure for the audience. Yeah. And then you end up building like relationships with them where they end up inviting you to stuff. At Google, I'll do deals with people. Like 2 people have invited me to their lake houses and they're like, oh yeah, just come to my, let me know. Get free weekend, like fly out. I got you. Yeah. And so I think that's how we're in the corporate world right now. But ideally, people are like, oh, like how did so-and-so entrepreneur meet so, like it's just, they just in the same
just
circle.
Network. That's just what they do. Same thing, because I got like partners at my firm who, we had a happy hour last week because somebody's moving on. And it was just a very like, I don't know the word I'm looking for, but just very open, like, because one, you got COVID. So it's like all these Zooms and stuff. And then we're finally getting some in-person interaction. And people were so happy to see each other. There was a whole lot of just, everybody was real inviting. It's like, yeah, come by the mansion in McLean. I got this big old deck and you know what I'm saying? You can come out here and my house is overlooking this and it's a beautiful site and I can show you more about what we were talking about earlier. I relish in those opportunities, but again, we're still in that corporate hierarchy schedule. But when you get in the ownership seat, owners talk to other owners, network with other people, and then they just end up being there. Like we seen Jay-Z on the yacht with Jack Dorsey. I think 2 weeks after that picture came out of them, bam, they announced the merger of Cash App and Twitter and whatever, and Jay did a deal, and I think he had like 200 million off that. It was just funny how like, the internet is real investigative. So everybody was like, yo, now these pictures make sense. They was on the yacht. 2 weeks later, they announced this big deal. So like, that's what we're trying to get, right? Yeah, no, definitely. A lot of stuff happens normally. You got to expand outside of your horizon, outside of your focal group. And I think that's some of the stuff that we're going to talk about today with like net worth. Yeah. And maybe we start with Mark Cuban. Because that was the question we had, right? I was like, yo, how much is Mark Cuban actually worth? And that's like something that people always measure, right? Every year they got these Forbes list. Yeah. Every year ESPN puts out the richest athletes list. People start dissecting endorsements, contracts, stuff that's public. But I think we dove into a little bit more and was like, how do they actually calculate someone's net worth? And then that's someone like that where it's like their company's public or their deals are public. But what about like at a personal level, how do you calculate your own net worth? That made us kind of start thinking like, how do we actually calculate net worth? And to me, the definition is your debts and your liabilities versus your assets. So if your debts and liabilities are higher than your assets, you have a negative net worth. And whatever the difference is between your assets and your debts and liabilities is your true net worth. But like, to get deeper than that, it's not always just going to be cash, right? Because so many people are just looking at like, you know, how much you have in the bank, but your money can be tied up in the market, in your real estate, in your art, in your stocks, and, you know, if you big time, your private islands. That's like the recurring question, I think, and it's like, how are they calculating these people's net worths? Everyone has strategy, and it's not always put out there. So how do you research someone's assets and liabilities if they only have certain deals publicly available? You know what I mean?
Yeah. And I don't think that you really can. Most of these magazines, and we could take a look at a couple of examples, like Forbes, for example, they'll put out these numbers, but it's missing just a whole bunch of data, meaning that it's missing. Family money isn't really included. So it's almost like what they can calculate or get their hands on, which reminds me of this, I don't know, metaphor, joke or something like that. So this guy gets super drunk with him and his boy, leaves the bar, looking for his keys, walking on the street, whatever. Drops his keys somewhere, and then he keeps like looking under the light, right? Like he's like, and then his boy's like, yo, you didn't drop your keys over there. Like, why are you looking at the light?
Right.
He's like, oh, well, that's the only place I could see.
Right. right.
So it's like you focus on where everything's illuminated, but that doesn't incorporate everything, meaning that we don't know about all the tax loopholes.
Right.
We don't know about all the, you know, the Cayman Islands, all the Switzerland funds.
Right.
And so it's almost like whatever Forbes writers can get their hands on is how they calculate it. But there's probably a whole bunch of people in crypto that own like hidden assets and a whole bunch of other stuff. And so the good thing to think about it is to understand net worth so you can calculate it for you.
Right.
But then also once you understand your net worth, right, assets and liabilities, and maybe we look up a definition here shortly, you can also start to understand how rich people, what they have assets in, because that can help to determine like your assets, right?
So by doing your research on them, you can start to formulate your own plays, right? Because I've even heard, you heard Kanye Kirkin, right? When he was mad when they reported whatever number. Yeah. He's like, Forbes try to say I'm worth 3 billion, I'm worth 6. How you gonna leave out my 3 bills, son? Or whatever it was, you know what I'm saying? He was mad. We've looked at the Forbes writers describe what they use, and one of the points you made to me, which I think is a good point, is like, these dudes are just researchers and journalists. They're not top tier finance people.
They're not financial
So
analysts.
how could you expect them to break down a billionaire's net worth
properly?
Yeah.
You can't.
That's what I'm saying. So like Kanye, that's the frustration. And I've also heard Floyd Mayweather get mad. One year he wasn't on the top of the list, and you know he wasn't having that. So whoever was past him, he like, they ain't even count my checks for yada yada yada. It's because I don't want them to count. They don't know about it. And you know what I'm saying? Just start dissing Forbes.
Yeah, but you don't want them to know about it.
It's like, all right, what's worth more? Your pride or like tipping them off that you got, you know what I'm saying? Because IRS is they looking, right?
They're real fans watching.
Yeah.
So 2 Chainz tell you that already.
You know what I mean? So
you could be fresh as hell, but you better have a good tax attorney.
Yeah, please.
When the fans watching.
Change is cool to cop, but more important is lawyer fees.
So let's dive into some of these videos.
All right.
So a lot of people wonder how we compile the Forbes billionaires list, and it's a massive, massive undertaking. You know, the entire Forbes billionaires list, it's basically a snapshot of the wealth of the world's billionaires and who they are and what they're worth. And so it's not the kind of thing where we're going through and picking who's going to be on the list and who's not going to be on the list. It's really just a big investigative project to say, here's who the world's wealthiest are, here's how much they have. This year we found 2,208 billionaires. We combed through a database of more than double that to arrive at that number. Most billionaires on the list don't have their whole net worth in cash. Often their wealth is tied up in the businesses they founded or inherited, and so that kind of stuff is usually traceable. If it's a public company, they have to disclose in the United States with the SEC, so we can comb through that and see how much of a company a person owns. And if it's a public company, the stock market actually puts a value on that for us. For private companies, it's a little bit more difficult and challenging, and in those cases, we try to find credible financial information about the business, and then we talk to experts who can tell us, what that business would actually be worth. But that's basically how we do it for private companies and for private assets too that billionaires own. Art collections, yachts, private islands, things like that. We have private island experts who can kind of help us assess the value of something like that. A lot of people ask why certain people aren't on the list. The members of the Rothschild family, the Rockefeller family, names like that. The list is really a list of individual billionaires. rather than, widespread family fortunes. And the same thing for people asking about Vladimir Putin or things like that. It's hard to break out where money is so intermingled with the government. And the other thing is we are looking into, what we can actually prove and pin down. And we always try to err on the conservative side, whenever doing any of our calculations.
Talking about that video, I think it mirrors like what we thought, right? They can only go with the information that's publicly available.
That they have, man.
And what billionaires do you know that don't have some kind of loophole situation going on where they're, whether it's to avoid paying the most tax or whether it's to have it sitting somewhere that will grow exponentially as opposed to just being cash?
Nah, definitely. I mean, everything that you said, I think, it's decent information, but it's not, I think it's just like more marketing than anything else, and then just something that Forbes does. But I wouldn't really hold that as a 100% way to look at it. But what I will say, though, that it is definitely, as a podcast that focuses on financially building wealth, right, career aspect of it, I think it's interesting that Kanye West has the potential to catch up to Robert Smith, who's earned it through private equity is a fucking beast.
Yeah, for sure.
And Kanye's coming from this creative rapper side who you'd never think would have that business acumen. And yes, I get that his contract isn't counted, but even the ability to have a contract that can possibly net you that and make you the number one net worth person, I think it's lessons in that.
Right. So let's talk about the Kanye deal, right? For the people that don't know, right? So he had this reported number that he's worth based on, I think a majority was Adidas, the 350s, what he did with the Yeezys and all that, right? And then that was like, all right, this made him a billionaire.
Yeah.
And then he's like, no, and it's Kanye way, nah, but y'all not counting, y'all not counting what I did with the, you know what I'm saying?
Yeah, so check this out. Forbes disputes Kanye West's $6.6 billion net worth, claims he's less worth than 1/3 of that. Good problems to have, though.
Yeah, for sure.
Good problems to have.
Please debate if I'm worth $5 billion or $3 billion.
Nah, you ain't worth 6.6. You only worth 1/3 of that. It's
right.
All right, bro.
Yeah, all right. Despite a recent report claiming Kanye West is now worth $6.6 billion, Forbes is disputing those numbers. In an article published by the publication on Thursday, March 18th, Forbes claims reports that the celebrity is worth nearly $7 billion are based on the magical thinking around sales that don't exist yet. This is why he's currently worth less than 1/3 of that. I think that's the point we just made. It's like the deal is there, but you actually have to honor it. And I'm assuming there's a number in there he has to hit to get his payout.
So let's double click on that before we finish the Kanye thing. What's top of mind for me is that when these young players sign contracts, they're like, oh, Vince Young signs X amount of contract, like a $30 billion contract. You can't really include all the clauses, but because the clause is like, hey, if you don't get injured and this happens and this happens. And so it's almost like all those numbers would also be fake news because you can't include things that include like a liability or like a risk clause for you not to get access to that actual money. Right. Like, oh, so like max sign for 50, it also should be like Kevin Durant signs a $100 million contract. Mm-hmm. It should really say Kevin Durant has the potential to make $100 million. Right. A potential $100 million contract with $25 million guaranteed. That's how it should read because that's more realistic.
They do. They try to, or at least the people who are astute enough pay attention to. There's the contract number and then there's the guarantee.
Yeah, the guarantee is the real number.
Yeah, that's why I think what's so monumental about the Deshaun Watson deal, who was the quarterback for the Browns, is the fact that he got a $232 million contract with all of it guaranteed. You don't see that in sports, right? Because it's normally as long as you play X amount of games, as long as you're not hurt, you have to get a certain amount of yards. That's why you see in week 16 and 17, random plays, because so-and-so has a $385,000 incentive if he gets 6 catches. That's and I don't know if this is true. I mean, this is like just getting more into the sports world, but there was an accusation of, remember Antonio Brown walked off the field and it was a big deal? He only needed 7 catches and 100 yards to make another $1 million. Mm-hmm. But they took him out of the game and they were targeting him, or they tried to put him in the game and he was saying he was hurt. I don't know, but there were like rumblings, true or not. The point I'm getting at is there's clauses like that in the contract for players like that. So The Deshaun Watson thing is crazy because it's like they really guaranteed this man all that money. You usually don't get that language in the contract. So like Kevin Durant signs, 3-year, $100 million deal. You do the math in your head, say, oh, he's making like 33 a year. Kevin Durant is a bad example because he's going to get the guarantee, but just take a lesser known athlete, then they have the potential to make it, but they might have $100 million on the table and 14 guaranteed. It's a big difference. It's important to include those details. And I think that's what we're getting at with the Forbes thing is like, they're including these numbers that are headlined without the clauses that could make a big difference if, the Yeezys don't sell, whatever per quarter. Gap share price doesn't go up $10, then they don't have to pay him, $3 billion.
Yeah,
I don't know.
They would have to.
Whatever it is.
No, you're right. And towards the end of this podcast, we'll talk about lessons learned from both of us. One is to understand the fucking contract. Now that I'm thinking about it, Forbes is doing Kanye dirty. Because as someone who forecasts for a living, you could forecast magic fairy tale numbers or you could under forecast like super conservative numbers, but you usually end up somewhere in the middle. So my whole point is if Kanye's deal is worth $3 billion, there's no way he's going to end up at zero. So even if you wanted to say, all right, like our conservative estimates are, we give him another, he's still going to be under Robert Smith. But my whole point is, it's nuances even in like how you dictate that. You know what I'm saying? So especially with these big contracts, because it's not like he's not going to sell nothing. He's Kanye West. He sold a ton already. Like, all right, Kanye's deal is worth X amount. We'll realize 1/3 for this Forbes. But then that also takes some creative thinking and someone who actually has money, who has access to it. So once again, going back to the people putting together the information, not throwing shade, just saying that you can't totally rely on it. Look at it as entertainment, but what you can do is take lessons learned from it. Looking at my own life and for our viewers, right? One quick way to get wealthy is like the number one way. I gotta stop
you because there's no quick way, they say, right? Because wealth has to last generations.
I said rich. So let's use rich. Yeah. So one quote unquote, and I say quote unquote because everybody says, I got rich overnight. The whole statement.
I just don't want them to sound bite you. Like, don't do that. My man know what he's talking about. All right, go ahead.
So and I say quick as tongue in cheek actually.
Right.
Is to have be really good at a skill set, to have conviction in something. And that's what Robert Greene talks about in the book Mastery. A couple other people talk about, like, I can't even, think of like everybody that talks about that. But I was listening to something. I was listening to like an investment podcast and can't remember the guy's name, but he works for David Rubenstein, who's one of the wealthiest investors ever. Right. And he was interviewing one of the guys on his team who started his company in 25, and now he did like the biggest deal with like Hilton. And he was like, what advice would you have or would you give to investors? He would say, have strong conviction. And even on another podcast I listened to, they said something similar, which was you can get rich over a long period of time by dollar cost averaging and everything else. Right. But the people who really like came up, like Paul Tudor Jones, and maybe that needs to be fact checked, right? But let's say rich investment guy in England who like did some massive deal with the Bank of England. And made like $1 billion. And Warren Buffett, when the economy crashed in 2008, he came in and bailed out all these banks. He got paid on that.
Of course.
That's having conviction. He wasn't investing in the subprime. He waited till it was done. He was like, nah, this is my hypothesis. Right. He put his money in and cashed out. And so all that to say is like the skill set, investing in a skill set, right? Like what you do for work and what I do for work now, selling technology, that's gotten us high earning income, which we're now able to flip into becoming rich. And then ideally, if we invest smartly, at some point we'll become wealthy. To be totally transparent, I don't even know what wealthy means really.
Because there's no number where you go from rich to wealthy, right?
Yeah, it's like subjective.
You ever seen those memes or those side by side pictures like this is rich, this is wealthy, right? And what are they really trying to say? Like, what's the underlying theme? I think rich is your money can run out in one generation if done incorrectly. Wealth is you have built an abundance where your money's gonna last for your kids' kids or your kids' kids. I think it becomes like, because I watch Billions, Bobby Axelrod, and he was having a conversation with another billionaire, and it's billionaire talk, so it's like all these undertones and weird. But one thing that I did pick up on was they were talking about a deal, and basically the guy was like, this is going to take me from 6 generations to 9. Like his money's so long right now, it's already gonna last his kids 6 times. But when he does this deal, it'll go 9 times, right? So they speak like that. Your wealth grows, and I think your wealth volume is determined by how many generations are already accounted for. Rich, I think, is you're still in that first one. Like yo, we're rich, but if we go out and buy $250,000 cars tomorrow and, you know what I'm saying, off $1 million doing something else, we're done, and our kid's gonna have to trap it back out. You know what I'm saying? That's rich if it can run out. And I think what you see is a lot of with athletes, and we're talking about celebrities, is they don't have the financial astuteness to hold on to that money. So when they had it, if they invested correctly, it could have built wealth.
I'll give you my definition, and then we'll look up what like Investopedia or somebody says.
Yeah.
To me, rich is when you're still high income earning, and wealthy is when you now have those investments to where you're earning money passively.
Where your money's making you more money.
Where money's making you money, and the liability of you going broke is almost like non-existent.
Eliminated, right.
So you could have
autopilot almost.
Yeah, so you could have 100. So like I would think, like, because that's how I think about it, and then we're gonna look up the definition of it. And here's my thought process behind it. So Mike Tyson made a ton of money, right? We know a whole bunch of people that made a ton of money.
Yeah.
$100 million could last 9 generations.
If invested properly.
If invested properly. So that's my whole point. I was listening to House of Gucci. Like I read the book. The girl who ended up shooting him, his wife, they ended up marrying.
That escalated quickly.
Yeah. Like
I don't know about this. So
it's a good movie. You got to watch it. Add it to your list tonight. Like it's hilarious.
House of Gucci?
House of Gucci. Yeah, it's on Apple.
Like
Apple
Gucci, the brand?
Yeah, Gucci. Okay. Like it's a whole movie. Like Shorty shot her husband.
Okay.
Like bang bang.
Like Miss Gucci?
Huh? Yeah, like Miss Gucci was like, they got divorced. He got a new bitch. She like, you know how it goes. The thing I like about
and killed him, or just
no,
survived?
I think she killed him. Like dude's dead. The wealth building principle in that whole, so that was a big drama, but the wealth building principle in that whole story was the way that they bought assets. Well, let's just use them as an example. Let's call them Mr. Gucci and Miss Gucci because we don't know their names, right? So you get married into the family, like your main house and all the beach houses are all in the company's name. So when you go to Cape Cod or go to the Hamptons, it's not in the husband's name. Right. It's in the company's name. Right. The family's name. Right. So you're just borrowing the asset.
Right.
That was so smart to me. That's how you keep money.
Yeah, of course.
Right. So you know what I'm saying? So like you can get divorced because so Dan Kennedy told this joke about Burt Reynolds randomly, where he was on a talk show and he was like, it was like 2 talk show guests. They were both whatever, and it was like, oh, talk show guest A, damn, you really rich like Burt Reynolds. Like, what happened to you? He was like, yo, 6 divorces.
Yeah, that'll do it. That'll do it.
You talk about building, like, so tying all this back into building wealth. All of that matters. So even if you have the money, now it's time to structure it. Now it's time to lock it up. Now it's time to put it in assets to where not even your kids can f it up. Right. Because the Vanderbilts also lost most of their that's like Anderson Cooper's family. Okay. And I don't think they're all broke, but there was a massive fortune that was blown. And so I think for some of these families that end up staying wealthy, it's not just the amount of money, it's how it's almost like you got to structure it against human psychology. And I think even being wealthy ourselves is the same thing. Rich is all your assets are still accessible. You can get married and get your shit up. You can get cut in half. People can borrow money, steal money from you. Wealthy is now it's in a corporation and I only get a stipend from it. So I could be wealthy getting a stipend from my business or my assets of like 10, 15 grand because I really don't want for nothing. And that same asset can be rolled down to my family. So it's not so yes, you need a couple million to call yourself wealthy. But to me, it's more the peace of mind and having those assets, house paid off, regular stipend money coming in, but you're not really touching the principle of the money. To me, that's Kerel's definition of wealthy, even if I don't know if that's society's definition of wealth.
Allen Iverson is a good example, I think, or a good use case in this particular conversation of someone who made a lot of money in the NBA, was rich, multi-millions, went through a divorce, went through, in his own words, excessive spending, entourage, 40 people with you everywhere you go, supporting a bunch of grown men, and pretty much got to the point where he was in court telling the judge, I can't even afford a cheeseburger in his divorce case. What Allen Iverson did have, though, was one homeboy who had his best interest at heart. He set up 2 things. One, he set up a lifetime deal with Reebok where they offered him a bunch of money up front, but he said, yo, instead of giving him the payout, just like we talk about with record deals. Instead of giving the advance, let me get a percentage of the company. And somehow he worked out like $800,000 a year in this deal that Iverson would start to get at a certain age.
Okay.
He set that up long before. So he was broke when he was in court, but he's like, in 4 years, you're about to get $800K a year just off Reebok. He also said, just give me $1 million and let me go ahead and handle your money for you while you do what you need to do. So long story short, and I don't know the exact particulars, and this is all in the article we can read somewhere, he made like close to 90 or over $100 million in his career, did what he did, f***ed it all up. But within that 90, he gave one of these homeboys $1 million. He put it in some kind of fund that performed over years and said, you can't touch this till you're 45. So, by the time he retired and did everything he did in basketball, and, at the end of his career, it was pretty bad. He ended up not getting signed, ended up playing in Italy. Like, obviously the money there is not the same.
Yeah.
But he was like struggling in his early 40s, but as soon as he turned 45, he was rich again, beyond his wildest imaginations. It opened up some kind of trust. He's making $800,000 a year off Reebok. The $1 million he got from his boy turned into 40, 50 million somehow, and AI's back on top.
Yeah.
And if he would have had the wealth framework that you just discussed early in his career, this would have never been a thing for him because it always would have been growing. But because he was rich, and while he had a lot of money and lived the AI life, and we saw AI in the club, right? Because AI was in DC, and that's where we at. And we saw how he was moving. And you know what I'm saying? 80 Rolls Royces outside the club, gold bottles everywhere.
He was like the little baby of the day.
He was.
Yeah,
you know what I'm saying?
Like out here.
In NBA format. So we saw him, living his life. But I think he's a good example here of like that one small choice he made obviously ended up him being well off. But imagine if that, instead of 1 million turning into whatever it turned to, he had put 15, 20, 30, or half as, or if he just lived more, whatever. And it's like, this is not on no counting another man's pocket, because I'm sure he would watch this and agree that like he would have made some different choices. So we just want to educate people to now, like, yeah, we might not be in a position where we get multi-million-dollar sports contracts, but you can negotiate and broker a good salary for yourself, create your own version of being rich and wealthy, and then grow to your financial goals. So that's what we're trying to implement now while we at this age and talk to the youngins, because, we get into OG age, but we ain't there yet. But, people younger than us who are looking at this information now.
I ain't never going to be an OG, baby. I ain't never going to be an OG, baby. I'm going to be on these yachts.
Forever young. So, just making smarter choices now before we come to that realization and that point that, like, it's too late. Like, because your income is your biggest wealth building tool until you get to a point where you're in the owner's seat.
What ended up happening to AI was just luck, but the wealth building principles don't go away, meaning that the biggest thing I've learned is, and I've heard people who are acquiring wealth at different degrees talk about it, is the more your money is locked up in assets, the less you got access to it.
Right.
While you can debate all day long on should you buy real estate, shouldn't you buy real estate, I think that, or the timing of the market or things like that, because, I'm in the market for a house now.
Right.
What most people don't know that underlies that is all the psychology of the human.
Yeah.
So meaning that, like it's a whole bunch of Silicon Valley tech bros. It's like, I don't need like a house, but they live super frugal.
Right.
Somebody like me, like the way my personality is built, I don't need 300 grand in cash like in my checking account.
Right.
Like I just don't.
Right.
Like there's you know what I'm saying?
If you scroll on your phone and you see that, you're going to make a different decision.
Right, like
than you would
you've been out with me.
Yeah, if it's an equity in an instrument, it's like, I can't just sell my house today and cash out my $300K and go out. Like, that would be a process.
Yeah.
So while it's part of my portfolio and part of my value, it's protecting me from going out and making bad decisions.
Yeah.
And I think that
I can only burn the money that's in my check-in, which, I don't keep a lot of money in my check-in. It's like less than 10 G's at any given time.
Yeah, and that's what we learned over time. Like,
right.
Why would I keep a bunch of money in a checking account that's returning 0.0001% when it can be in so many other places at the bare minimum, even in a low-risk place, bringing me at least 4 or 5.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah, no, you're right. So let's look up the difference between rich and wealthy. So I'm gonna do two definitions from Millennial Money Women, because it was top of the Google search chart. So shout out to y'all. This is written by Fiona Smith. Her definition is the difference between being rich versus wealthy is two completely different concepts. Although being rich and being wealthy may be considered similar, they are two different very different and two very opposite things. And trust me, you'll want to be known being wealthy over being rich. Keep reading. What does it mean to be rich? If you want to know what being rich means, then you want to think of some popular rappers, football players, and Hollywood stars. Sometimes it seems like they are screaming the word, I'm rich. That's because rich is about having a lot of income, spending a lot of money, showing off how much money you have. Yes, being rich means you have a lot of money. But being rich doesn't necessarily mean that you have a high net worth or that you will always be, quote unquote, rich. In fact, being rich could mean that you are in debt. Why? Most people who are rich spend more than they earn. If you read any of my budgeting articles, then you know that becoming rich, you need to spend less than you earn. To become rich, you need to spend less than you earn. I'll never forget this story. I was a teenager and met one of my parents' friends. He was a former American baseball player. When he was playing baseball, he was 30 years old, earning $4 million a year, considered the next superstar. Then an ankle injury put him out of the game and he was forced to retire at 34. That was 6 years ago. Now he's 40. Him and his wife are driving $200,000 Ferraris, living in a $3 million mansion, earning $30K a year from a lawnmower business, buying their 16-year-old daughter a $60,000 car, which she crashed in week 1. And you know what? They are broke massively, and they will have to file for bankruptcy. You cannot build wealth if you spend more than you earn. If you don't believe my personal story, check out the many other celebrities that have rich lifestyles but ended up worse off than before they entered starlight. Michael Jackson, the whopping cost of $10 million a year to operate Michael's Neverland Ranch. He was at least $400 million in debt.
Good Lord.
Lindsay Lohan, partying, addiction, etc., causing Lindsay to file for bankruptcy in 2012. Mike Tyson, divorce, excessive spending, was $23 million in debt. 50 Cent, excessive spending was $32.5 million in debt. The bottom line, you can be rich and you can be on the verge of bankruptcy. Being rich is more about showing off your money than using your money as a tool to build long-term growth. If you're rich, you're also likely to go broke. What does it mean to be wealthy? If you want to achieve financial freedom, then chances are you'll want to become wealthy. Wealth has everything to do with your most precious asset, time. Becoming wealthy means time to do the things you want to do, time to spend with the people you love, time to learn about the things you want to learn. When you're wealthy, you're not living the paycheck to paycheck. And so it seems like my definition was a little more close to it, because my definition of wealthy, even generational wealth, right, is the ability to have a financial vehicle that allows you to do all these things, spend time, money, without having to think about it. Right. Like my son don't got to be the next basketball player. It's like, bruh.
Right. I've taken care of it.
Right, you got 15 G's. Even if you blow that, every month you get 15 G's and you can't touch the principal. Right. To me, that's how you keep, that's like wealth. Right. The minute you and I are earning $20,000 a month and our expenses are 10, and that's coming from an asset that we don't have to continue to build. Right.
Your wealth is still building, and your spending is not, you're not outspending your earnings. So this is a more official definition. It'll be a lot shorter. This is Bankrates or bankrate.com. Wealth refers to around income generating assets rather than the money itself. A Charles Schwab survey found that Americans need to accumulate 2.4 million to identify themselves as wealthy. But wealth, like rich, is relative. You need more of it to live in New York City than in the Great Plains. So passive income and investments, wealth typically comes from passive income and investments. The IRS defines passive income as earnings you generate from real estate or earn without active participation. Real estate, rental income, stock dividends, and royalties are all examples of passive income. Financial freedom. Passive income streams perpetuate financial freedom, which allows you to live your desired lifestyle regardless of whether you work. And I won't keep going, but that's kind of like what we're saying here. Is like, when you're at a point where whether you work or not, your money's making you money, mm-hmm, and that money doesn't exceed, meaning what you spend doesn't exceed what you earn, you're not worried about where the next check is coming from. You're doing what you want to do. And then more importantly, your wealth is still building while that's happening. Because if your passive income is $10,000 a month, but your lifestyle is $20,000 a month, you're running 10 in a negative and your wealth is decreasing. But to use those same numbers, if your passive is 10,000, but your lifestyle is 5,000, that's still 5 going back into whatever that continues to grow. So wealth to me is when you're on the other side of that paradigm, mm-hmm, and then things continue to progress. Now, obviously, the bigger the gaps, the more wealthy, right? Because if you're earning 2 million passively, but you're living off 100,000, that's, 1.9 every single month that's going back into whatever that continues to build. So that's where I think, the Walton family and the Rothschilds and the people whose money is just going to continue to
that's different money.
Do what they're going to do. So, so what we're trying to, I guess, advocate for in the Black community and people who are listening to this podcast is like, figure out your version of that, get to a point where you're building something to a point where you have enough passive income coming in that'll maintain the lifestyle you want, but your wealth can continue to be passed on to your family.
Yeah, and then what I would add for that is everybody needs to do the homework for themselves.
Right.
Meaning that, so now that so we'll just use Bankrate for now, even though, I'm very opposed to listening to to listen to one source.
Right.
But we'll use them just because that's the information that's in front of us and that you just mentioned.
Yeah.
So now that we know that $2.4 million is considered wealthy, right? Just like in general, obviously there's a whole bunch of nuances with that. That's not my number. My number is 3 mil. And 3 million to me means 3 million in assets outside of my house.
It can't include your house?
I don't want it to. So it'd be 3 point whatever my house is worth, 3.8 then, right? Because the whole principle is $3 million in assets earning revenue.
Okay.
Right?
And
like
your house isn't really earning you unless you own a home outright and receive rental income from it. That's it.
Right, but that's like rental stuff. Yeah, so like everything that's an asset is not my home. So not my main home because that's not an income generating thing outside of the market going up and down. So then the reason why...
So let's just throw rental in as a caveat for that example. But
yeah. No, that's cool. We could throw rental in there. And the reason why is at that number, even a low percentage of all my returns, like in bad years, still covers like my lifestyle. So you put that 3 aside and you don't touch that, and that's when I can start getting ignorant.
Yeah, I got you.
You know what I'm saying?
3 mil.
Like after 3 mil, like once you see me with like a Ferrari and all that stuff, know that my net worth is, and don't try to come for me or rob me. I can shoot. I'm gonna just put that out there right now. With that said, we still from the hood.
Maryland, baby.
we still from the hood. But after that, then I would feel psychologically comfortable with like burning money. I mean, yeah, and we wear drip and travel and all that stuff. But you see some of these.
It's calculated.
Yeah, so it's calculated and it's thought through. And the most important thing about it is that it's peace of mind.
Right.
Like when I'm out burning, 20, 30 G's, I'm not thinking about like, am I going broke in the club with some of these young kids. First contract, got the whole entourage. Like Vince Young opened up a whole bunch of restaurants, all this stuff. It's like your burn rate. It's like, like you earn X amount of dollars, but your burn rate, like to me, like that's burn rate.
Right.
It's like, you can earn $5 million, but if you got 4 houses, 3 baby mamas, and a whole bunch of businesses that aren't doing well, your money, you know what I'm saying? Like you don't have enough money, so now you start acquiring debt.
Right.
So and especially if you're still high income earning, then you're fucked at some point.
Yeah, for sure. And I mean, that's why most athletes, celebrities, and people who are making this money for the first time go broke in the first 3 to 5 years. You've seen 30 for 30. There's whole specials on this stuff. And now I think it's getting better because they're implementing financial literacy as a mandate for people who first get here. But I mean, most of these guys are 19, 20 years old. You know what I'm saying? So that's why the judgment doesn't come off strong for me, because like I know you just mentioned like, now we're at an age where if we burning thousands in the club or on vacation or doing what we do, we're fully cognizant of what we're doing. We've already assessed why this can make sense for us to do. We know that we're still going to have a place to go home to, and we still got our careers and money in order. Is it the smartest decision all the time? No, but at least it's calculated. But let's be real.
Yeah.
When we first started making, I'll just say a grown salary, when we graduated school and got that first job, and let alone, when we first started touching 6 figures, we did some pretty irresponsible shit.
But I enjoyed it so much, man. Like,
I don't have a lot of regrets, but like now,
I'm gonna be honest on this podcast. Yes.
Yeah.
My net worth could probably be another $500,000 to $600,000.
Straight up.
Without the lifestyle that's I mean, I bought a 7 Series cash.
Straight up.
I did a whole bunch of reckless shit, but god damn, it was fun.
Man, I'm over $200,000 in on metal because I thought about all the cars that I bought: 2 BMWs, a Range Rover, Audi. You know what I'm saying? All the stuff that we've acquired over time. Especially between my wife and I just be thinking like, yes, it was nice to have these things and I enjoyed them, but when you really look at it, sometimes you're like, man, that same $200,000 in the market over the past 12 years could have, been well worth 7 figures right now. You know what I'm saying? So we're still young and we figured it out and now our trajectory is right. But I try not to pass judgment on somebody in their early 20s. You know, I didn't make professional athlete money, but some of those get those league minimums or that good first 2-3 million. And it sounds like I'm a multimillionaire, but you start doing the shit Vince Young was doing or Adrian Peterson, you know what I'm saying? And I'm only calling out stories that are public. Like my man.
Oh, Adrian Peterson went broke, right?
Oh man, showed this last year. And mind you, he's on the back part of his career. I want to say he's like 35, 34 in the NFL. That's considered old unless you Tom Brady or quarterback or, you know, whatever. He's a running back and their lifespan in the league is already shorter. But yeah, the paperwork came out and he had over $9 million in debt from, you know, loans and mortgage products and stuff like that. And he signed like a 1.8 for 1 year. So it's like my man has to play. And even with playing, he's probably playing
too much.
He's probably playing just to make the minimum payments to his creditors and then hopefully can make a play to get out. But I don't know, like this stuff be happening to athletes. And you know what I'm saying? It's almost like the Bill Wang joint we just did, but on a smaller scale. Like he had 20 billion and leveraged more than that, like 30 billion. All right, these players will make 10 million, but they'll leverage 35 million because they'll have a mansion in Miami. They'll have a mansion in LA. They'll have, you know, a $20,000 dog, you know, and then just 4 Lamborghinis and 2 Ferraris. And
it's tough to say no,
you know what I mean?
Right? Like,
so,
like it's super crazy. So, I mean, like most of y'all like laugh, right? But I mean, Mac, like you can attest to this, right? Like you could, like even when we go on like vacation with stuff, right? Like we did Cabo in December, right?
Yep.
What I do usually before like vacation, don't I usually prepay it?
You do.
Like I usually like I don't go on vacation unless it's paid for in cash. Like you can ask all my friends. Like I Venmo them, I'd be like, all right, how much is for the hotel? All right, you handle that. And yes, I can get points and all that stuff. I'm just super cognizant of going in debt.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? I think I got like $1,500 on my credit card that I can pay off tomorrow. And that's because I just bought new studio equipment. Right. I have no f***ing debt. I have like no a little bit of student loans. That's it. Yeah. I'm that paranoid. And I got money to spend, but when I'm going on, like this shit's already paid for.
Right.
Like, right?
And that's a learning experience.
Like you can speak, like you can speak to it. Like all my friends could be like, oh, if you go on a vacation with Kay, he gonna tell you we're gonna start 6 months early. We gonna calculate what the whole vacation's worth.
No, for sure.
And we're gonna pay it up front with our bi-weekly money. No credit cards, no nothing.
You were dollar cost averaging before it was a thing. And I'll give you that because you implement that in the vacation. And we, you know, people him on, but it's gonna let you know where people stand too. Because like, let's be real, you see all these memes and jokes about like, you know, black people planning a trip and it's 12 people on the group text. Then a picture of people on the trip, it's 3 people there, right? Yeah. But we avoid that because we know where everyone stands months in advance because we are bi-weekly putting on it and doing this and that, and that comes from learning experience, right?
From just like financial learning, like it's spending 15, 20 racks. On, I mean, the amount doesn't matter, but we spend a good amount on vacation. But what I would say is that it's not irresponsibly spent. We don't overspend. Yeah. And yes, it's 50, it can be like 15, 20 grand between all of us or whatever. But it's usually like, like the hotel going to be X amount, but it's all like covered. Right. And so when you come home, there's no debt, there's nothing, exactly. Right? And so and I've been through that ringer in the early 20s. That's why I learned. So like, to your point, right? Even the small credit card debt we have now is paid off every month before the statement date. So now I know the ratios, I know utilization, I know about credit. But before, when I finally got out of consumer debt, I was scared to death to go back. So I never just run it up no more, right? I never just run it up. So now it's like, talking to somebody who may be drowning in debt and trying to get out of it, like that's how.
This is where I'm like, okay, because we made a video about Dave Ramsey, right? About the things we disagree with, but I agree with his 7-step baby system. Steps 1 and 2: put aside an emergency fund and be very aggressive towards consumer debt. Where I start to disagree with them is the investing and pay your house in full type of stuff. But like, at a minimum, you got to get a control on what you can handle, right? You know what I'm saying? You knock out that consumer debt and then you figure out ways to dollar cost average your lifestyle. If there's not enough money there to do the things we're talking about, I would defer to, something that you always talk about, which is investing in yourself. You know what I'm saying? Put some money into whatever you're striving to be. Like if we're IT guys, so, you want to break into IT, invest in courses and coaching and certifications, and pick a skill set, become knowledgeable. You know, if you're of age or want to do the school thing, go to school, get a degree. Do online classes, get some experience, take an entry-level job, even if it's not the money you want, on the side, just to get the experience. That's an investment in yourself. So if the things that we're talking about are like at a point where you're like, yeah, all that stuff sounds great. Y'all talking about just pay off my credit card debt. I can't just do that. It's like, well, why? Because you got to take some accountability and say, like, what decisions am I making to put myself in the best position to get to the point where, like, I can pay off my consumer debt, dollar cost average my lifestyle, start investing and get where I need to go.
Let's read the definition of net worth according to Investopedia, and then let's just do a takeaway each of what we want the people to take away from this video.
All right, let's do it.
What is net worth? Net worth is the value of the assets a person or corporation owns minus the liabilities they owe. It is an important metric to gauge a company's health, providing a useful snapshot of current financial positions. Key takeaways. Net worth is a quantitative concept that measures the value of an entity and can apply to individuals, corporations, sectors, and even countries. Net worth provides a snapshot of an entity's current financial position. In business, net worth is also known as book value or shareholders' equity. People with substantial net worth are called high net worth individuals. Net worth is calculated by subtracting all liabilities from assets. An asset is anything owned that has monetary value, while liabilities are obligations that deplete resources such as loans, accounts payables, and mortgages.
Yep.
Net worth can be described as either positive or negative, with the former meaning that assets exceed liabilities and the latter that liabilities exceed assets. Positive and increasing net worth indicates good financial health. Decreasing net worth, on the other hand, is cause for concern as it might signal a decrease in assets relative to liabilities.
Yep.
The best way to improve net worth is either to reduce liabilities while assets stay constant or rise, or increase assets while liabilities either stay constant or fall.
I think that's spot on, right? At a base, base level. This is why I used to like this website, and I don't even know if it's still around. I ain't logged in forever, but I used to go on mint.com to try to see my net worth, because it allows you to link all your accounts.
Yeah, it does.
But what I used to do, right, and I don't know if this is cheating or not, I would have one profile with my mortgage on it and one without it, because I'm like, I want to see like what it is outside of my house, because your mortgage will make you feel like, oh damn, I'm negative. But then when you account the equity you have in your home, where you to sell it today or whatever you're gonna do with your property, that number can be different. So every time I used to log in the joint with the mortgage, it was like, oh damn. But that's the true number.
But that's the true number.
But at the same time, you have to think about it like, or at least I think about it like, obviously the goal long term is to pay off the home and own it in full. But if I were to sell it today, especially in 2022, I would make this amount and then this would be my net worth. So it's hypothetical, but it's still like, I think should be considered in your portfolio.
All right, Max, so we're coming towards the close of our first long form podcast. I haven't thought of a name yet. So guys, I think, like I was thinking like New Rules FM, the official podcast, because we already got like the show on there.
Yeah.
That we called the podcast. Guys, you're with us building this. Like, you guys tell us what you want. We're giving you different forms of contact, different interactions. We're going to start the Patreon. So subscribe to that for bonus episodes. We're going to be going in depth into numbers.
Yeah.
Like real, like behind the scenes, like no holds bar, like none of that bullshit, right? Real numbers based on our bank accounts, like what we're investing in, like where we are, like all that stuff. Anyway, but let's wrap up this episode. So what's the main takeaway you got from the conversation about net worth today?
I think the main takeaway I got is, the formulaic expression that you just read pretty much, which is, your liabilities and expenses minus your assets. That's really where you land, right? So if that's a negative number, you have a negative net worth. If it's a positive number, you have a positive net worth. And no matter what stage of the game you're in, as long as the end goal is, to have your assets exceed your liabilities and then begin to invest and build your wealth from there. I think that's where you want to be. And, that's pretty much my main takeaway. If you weren't game planning that way or including everything, you need to start doing that. But I like the takeaway you gave, so go ahead and share with the people.
Yeah.
Your main takeaway.
My main takeaway is that according to Bankrate, right, wealthy, if you need a definition for it, which I don't really think you do, but it's $2.4 million of net assets, right? Mm-hmm. But more importantly, because you can lose that if your burn rate, right? Like, so we can agree that athletes, like you gave the example of Adrian Peterson having a $1.8 million contract or whatever that amount is, and a whole bunch of debt tied to that, which means that he's in a negative and he's fucked. Yeah. Being wealthy, it's more of a mindset where you're continuing to build assets and put your money into things that increase in value.
Right.
And making sure that your liabilities have no fucking chance of catching up with them. And if you're talking about creating wealth for future generations, as you and I are going to do, right? Leo's going to be set. When I have a kid, they're going to be set. We're both going to do, and I'll make sure all my friends do what happened in House of Gucci. No matter who your son marries, like I'm not worried about who's coming to the family, because all that will be tied up with the corporation.
Right.
You can borrow the house in Martha's Vineyard. You can borrow the house in the Hamptons. You could get married, and yes, I'll give my son or daughter the house.
Right.
But it's not going to be in their name.
Right. Be in a company name.
It's going to be in a company name, so that way, in a divorce or anything separate, right, you were just borrowing that house.
Right.
Right. And that's how you keep start to build generational assets.
Yeah.
And I think that's what rich people do. Not that I know, but as we start to get more and more money and try to become more financially astute, those are some of the things that we need to learn and implement to create long-term wealth.
For sure. And right? I'll add to my takeaway now that we're on there. I think wealth is more like having the framework in place for your money to continue to expand. Mm-hmm. Rich is having the framework in place where one bad decision or a few bad decisions and a bad burn rate can take you out. So you want to have a wealthy framework where things are set up like you just described, or in other instruments where, basically whatever money that your money is earning you is not exceeding what you're spending, so your wealth can continue to grow. So that's what we want for you. It's the New Rules Pod. We're closing out. This is episode 1.
New Rules FM. New Rules Podcast, the official episode 1, the official podcast. We don't even know what we're going to call it yet. We're going to figure it out in the next week or two.
Yeah, for sure. But it's coming.
But I'm liking New Rules FM.
I like that. I mean, we might flow with that.
You might flow with that, but who knows, man? Just thank you guys for being with us on this journey. Let us know if you like this long form style of content. I think it's more relaxed, and we're able to give you a more introspective look into how we think.
Yeah, man. We had to give the people something for, when they cleaning the house, or when they on that long drive, or when they sitting in traffic, or, they just want to hear some cool niggas talk about all this shit. And, they're more like me versus what you see on TV.
Yeah.
So we letting you in this world, and wait till we drop the Patreon where, like Kay said, we're going to peel the curtains back. We logging into the accounts. We're showing you the investments. You're going to be able to track real time, where we were in April of 2022 versus April of 2023. All that's going to be transparent. So join us on this journey.
Some of it's going to be transparent.
Yeah, of course not all.
Like not the house in the Cayman Islands, my G.
Yeah, no, we can't. You know what I'm saying? We're going to peel back the curtain a little bit. We ain't about to open it. We're going to peel it back a little bit. But no, we got you, man. New Rules Pod, subscribe, like. Look out for the Patreon that's coming. Bonus content coming. And you know what it is.